Welcome to Stellar Narratives. For 5,000 years, China has been the most continuously inhabited civilization on Earth. Empires rose and collapsed. Dynasties replaced each other in cycles of war and renewal. Foreign powers invaded, conquered, and were eventually absorbed. Through all of it, one truth remained constant. Behind every emperor, every dynasty, every golden age, and every catastrophe, there was a clan. In this video, we are counting down the 10 most powerful clans in Chinese history. These are the families who fought their way to the top, built empires that lasted centuries, and in some cases defined what China itself means as a civilization. We are covering their greatest leaders, the fighting styles and military innovations that put them in power, and the achievements and failures that shaped their legacies. Stay until the end because number 1 on this list produced the single most transformative moment in 5,000 years of Chinese history. One man, one decision, and China was never the same again. Let us begin. Number 10. The Cao Clan. Three Kingdoms era. Active late 2nd to 3rd century AD. Most of China's great clans built their power over generations. Cao Cao built his in a decade. Cao Cao was born into a family connected to the imperial court through his adoptive grandfather, a eunuch official of the Han Dynasty. When the Han Empire began its final collapse in the late 2nd century, China dissolved into warlordism. Dozens of regional powers fought each other for supremacy. Cao Cao looked at the chaos and saw an opportunity that nobody else moved on as quickly or as decisively. His fighting style was what separated him from every other warlord of the era. Cao Cao was not a brute force commander. He was a psychologist on the battlefield. He studied the ancient military texts obsessively, particularly Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and applied them with creative flexibility rather than rigid formula. He was famous for deceptive tactics, feigned retreats designed to draw enemies into ambushes, night attacks when his enemies least expected them, and intelligence gathering before every major engagement. He moved his armies at speeds that consistently caught opponents off guard. He also had an almost supernatural ability to find and cultivate talent. His inner circle included some of the most brilliant strategists and administrators in Chinese history. He did not care about a man's background or origin. He cared about what that man could do. By the end of his life, Cao Cao controlled the entire northern half of China and held the last Han emperor as a political puppet. He never declared himself emperor, perhaps understanding that the legitimacy the Han name still carried was more useful to him than a crown. It was his son Cao Pi who finally dissolved the Han dynasty and declared the Wei kingdom. History has never quite agreed on how to judge Cao Cao. He was brutal, calculating, and capable of terrible acts of revenge. He was also one of the finest poets of his era and a genuine patron of learning. China's greatest novelist, writing 1,500 years later, made him the unforgettable villain of the Three Kingdoms story. That portrayal has stuck. But the Cao clan built one of the Three Kingdoms from a collapsing empire using nothing but talent, speed, and strategic genius. That is not a villain's achievement. That is a great clan's achievement. Number 9. The Sima clan. Western Jin Dynasty. 3rd century AD. The Sima clan did what almost no family in Chinese history managed. They waited out the Cao clan and took everything. Sima Yi began his career as a trusted advisor to Cao Cao himself, serving the Cao clan loyally for decades while quietly building his own family's influence and military connections. He survived Cao Cao. He survived Cao Pi. He outlasted them all with extraordinary patience, biding his time through decades of service while his sons grew into capable commanders. When the moment finally came in 249 AD, Sima Yi moved with decisive speed in the Gaoping Tombs coup, seizing control of the Wei government in a single day and neutralizing the Cao clan's political power permanently. He was in his early 70s. He had waited most of his adult life for that moment. His fighting style mirrored his personality. Sima Yi was a defensive strategist of genius. His most famous campaigns were against the great Shu general Zhou Liang, widely considered the finest military mind of the Three Kingdoms era. Where Zhou Liang sought decisive battle, Sima Yi refused to engage on unfavorable terms, stretching supply lines, waiting for exhaustion, and allowing time itself to do the killing. He outlasted Zhou Liang as he had outlasted everyone else. His grandsons completed the work, with Sima Yan reunifying China under the Jin dynasty in 280 AD, ending the century of fragmentation that had begun with the fall of the Han. The Sima clan's lesson is one of the most consistent in Chinese history. In a civilization that measured time in dynasties and centuries rather than decades, patience was not a passive virtue. It was the sharpest weapon of all. Number 8. The Yang clan. Sui Dynasty. Active late 6th to early 7th century AD. China in the late 6th century had been divided for nearly 350 years. Multiple kingdoms had risen and fallen. The country had been split along cultural, ethnic, and political lines for so long that reunification seemed almost impossible. Yang Jian ended the division in 8 years. As the founder of the Sui dynasty, Yang Jian, known posthumously as Emperor Wen, came from a mixed Han and non-Han aristocratic family with deep military roots in the northwest frontier. He seized power in 581 through a combination of political maneuvering and military force, and then immediately turned his energies toward reunification. The Sui military machine was formidable. Yang Jian reformed the army by expanding the equal field system, which gave soldiers land in exchange for military service, creating a loyal and motivated force. His campaigns deployed massive coordinated infantry and cavalry forces, using detailed logistical planning that reflected his family's generations of frontier military experience. The conquest of the southern Chen dynasty in 589 involved over 500,000 troops across multiple simultaneous attack routes, one of the largest coordinated military operations in Chinese history to that point. The Yang clan's achievements in governance matched their military record. Yang Jian reformed the civil service examination system, opening government positions to talent rather than birth. He standardized weights, measures, and coinage across a reunified China. He built vast granary systems to protect against famine. His son Yang Guang, Emperor Yang, constructed the Grand Canal, one of the greatest engineering projects in human history, connecting northern and southern China through over 1,000 miles of artificial waterways. The Grand Canal is still in use today, 1,400 years later. But the Yang clan burned through their achievements at catastrophic speed. Emperor Yang's obsessive campaigning, particularly his 3 disastrous invasions of Korea, broke the dynasty's finances and legitimacy. He was assassinated in 618, less than 40 years after his father had unified China. The Sui dynasty lasted just 2 emperors. It also laid the foundations for everything that came next, because the clan that replaced them had been watching and learning the entire time. Number 7. The Zhou clan. Zhou dynasty. Reigned approximately 1046 to 256 BC. The Zhou clan ruled China for roughly 800 years. No other family in Chinese history came close. The Zhou dynasty they founded is the longest in Chinese history, and what makes it remarkable is that it survived long after it had any real power, sustained entirely by the cultural and spiritual authority that the Zhou clan had accumulated over centuries. By the later Zhou period, regional lords called on the Zhou king for ceremonial legitimacy, even as they ignored his actual commands and fought constant wars against each other. The throne had become a symbol rather than a seat of power, but it was a symbol powerful enough to maintain for centuries. The early Zhou rulers were formidable warriors. King Wen and his son King Wu overthrew the Shang dynasty through a combination of political alliance building and decisive military campaign. The Zhou fighting style relied on war chariots, aristocratic warriors who trained obsessively in archery and chariot combat, and a feudal military structure that bound regional lords to the central dynasty through obligation and ritual. The Zhou period produced something more enduring than any military achievement. It produced Chinese thought. Confucius lived during the Zhou period. Laozi, the foundational figure of Taoism, lived during the Zhou period. Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War during the Zhou period. The philosophical traditions that define Chinese civilization to this day, Confucianism, Taoism, legalism, and dozens of other schools of thought, emerged during a time of Zhou political fragmentation known as the 100 Schools of Thought. The Zhou clan did not create those philosophies, but they created the conditions, a long, complex, turbulent, culturally fertile era in which they could emerge. 800 years of a single family's name on the throne of China produced a civilization's entire intellectual foundation. Number 6. The Aisin Gioro clan. Qing Dynasty. Reigned 1644 to 1912 AD. The Aisin Gioro clan were not Chinese. They were Manchu, a people from the northeastern forests and plains beyond China's northern frontier. And they conquered the largest country on earth. The clan's founder Nurhasai, who unified the Manchu tribes in the early 17th century, created the Eight Banners system, one of the most effective military organizational structures in Chinese history. Every Manchu family was assigned to a banner, a combined military and administrative unit that governed every aspect of life from childhood through to old age. Men trained from boyhood in mounted archery and cavalry warfare. The banners created a warrior society where military excellence was not a profession, but a birthright and a daily practice. When China's Ming dynasty collapsed in internal rebellion in 1644, the Aisin Gioro clan marched their banner armies through the Great Wall and took the country. The conquest took decades of campaigning to complete, but the military core of the Eight Banners was so superior in organization, discipline, and cavalry tactics that resistance, while fierce, could not hold. Under the Qing dynasty, the clan expanded China's territory to its greatest extent in history, incorporating Tibet, Xinjiang, and Mongolia into the empire through a combination of military conquest and diplomatic marriage. The Kangxi Emperor, one of the Aisin Gioro's greatest rulers, reigned for 61 years and personally led military campaigns into the field into his 50s. Their demon was a slow forgetting of what had made them powerful. As the king's centuries passed, the banner armies grew comfortable, the old cavalry discipline faded, and by the 19th century the military that had conquered China was no longer capable of defending it against European firepower. The Opium Wars, the Taiping Rebellion, and eventually the Revolution of 1911 brought the dynasty and the clan's rule to an end. But for over 2.5 centuries, a non-Chinese family from the northeastern forests held the throne of the world's most populous nation. That is a conquest story unlike almost any other. Number 5. The Zhao clan. Song Dynasty. Reigned 960 to 1279 AD. The Song dynasty was not China's most powerful military force. It was something more lasting. Zhao Quanjian, a general who became Emperor Taizu through a military coup in 960, founded the Song with a deliberate intention to prevent the kind of military strongman politics that had plagued China for centuries. He systematically reduced the power of regional military commanders, placing civil administrators in control of government and subordinating the military to civilian oversight. The result was a civilization that produced more technological innovation in 3 centuries than almost any other culture in human history. Gunpowder weapons were developed and deployed on a large scale under the Song. Fire arrows, explosive bombs, fire lances, and early cannons were all used by Song armies. The Song Navy became the most powerful in Asia, deploying paddle wheel warships driven by manual power and later gunpowder-propelled weapons. Paper money was introduced. Movable type printing was invented. The compass was developed for navigation. The population of China under the Song reached 100 million people, the first nation in human history to do so. The Song fighting style reflected their resources and philosophy. Rather than mobile cavalry armies, Song forces relied on sophisticated defensive fortifications, crossbow-heavy infantry that could hold ground against cavalry, and naval dominance of rivers and coastlines. They were not conquerors. They were defenders, and some of their defensive campaigns against nomadic powers from the north lasted for generations. The Zhao clan ultimately fell to the Mongols, the one force their defensive strategies could not contain indefinitely. The last Song emperor, a 7-year-old child, died at sea in 1279 when his court took to the waves rather than surrender. A loyalist minister jumped into the ocean, holding the child emperor in his arms. It was not the first time in Chinese history that a dynasty ended with a child emperor drowning in the sea. But the Song left behind a civilization so technologically and culturally advanced that even their Mongol conquerors were transformed by it. Number 4. The Zhou clan. Ming Dynasty. Reigned 1368 to 1644 AD. Zhou Yuanzhang began his life as an orphaned beggar monk. He ended it as the Emperor of China. Born in 1328 into one of the poorest families in Yuan dynasty China, Zhou lost his entire family to famine and plague as a child, and spent years wandering as a Buddhist monk begging for food. He joined a rebel movement almost accidentally, discovered a talent for military leadership, and rose through the ranks of the Red Turban Rebellion until he commanded an army of his own. By 1368, he had driven the Mongol Yuan dynasty out of China and declared the Ming dynasty from Nanjing. The journey from orphaned beggar to son of heaven is one of the most extraordinary personal stories in Chinese history. The Ming military system was built around massive standing armies, the largest in the world during the dynasty's peak. At its height, the Ming maintained over 1 million soldiers under arms. The dynasty pioneered the large-scale use of gunpowder artillery, deploying cannons and early firearms alongside traditional infantry in ways that gave them decisive advantages over enemies without equivalent technology. The construction and reinforcement of the Great Wall of China, the version most people picture today, was almost entirely a Ming achievement, a vast defensive engineering project designed to keep the northern steppe powers out permanently. The Ming also looked outward in a way no Chinese dynasty before or since attempted. Between 1405 and 1433, Admiral Zheng he commanded 7 enormous treasure voyages across Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, and the east coast of Africa. The largest of his ships were 4 times the size of anything Europe was sailing at the time. China had the capability to become a global maritime power. Then the court decided to stop. The voyages were cancelled. The ships were allowed to rot. The records were partly destroyed. One of history's great what-ifs. The Zhou clan's rule ended in 1644 when a rebel army took Beijing, and the last Ming emperor hanged himself from a tree on Coal Hill behind the Forbidden City, alone and abandoned, leaving a note written in his own blood asking his conquerors to spare the Chinese people. From orphan beggar to dynastic founder to that final note on Coal Hill. The Zhou clan's story contains more human drama than most civilizations produce in 1,000 years. Number 3. The Liu Clan. Tang Dynasty. Reigned 618 to 907 AD. The Tang Dynasty is considered by many historians to be the greatest period in Chinese history. The Liu Clan built it. Liu Yuan, a Sui dynasty general with mixed Han and Turkic aristocratic heritage, launched his rebellion against the collapsing Sui in 617 and took the throne in 618. But it was his second son, Liu Shimin, who became Emperor Taizong, who defined what the Tang would be and who remains one of the most admired rulers in all of Chinese history. Taizong came to power through an act of brutal family politics, killing his 2 brothers in the Xuanwu Gate incident and forcing his father to abdicate. Once on the throne, he proved to be something far rarer than a successful schemer. He was a genuinely great ruler. The Tang military was the most formidable force in Asia during its peak. The Liu clan brought the martial traditions of the northern frontier aristocracy to the Tang throne and built an army that combined heavy armored cavalry, highly mobile light cavalry units, and sophisticated combined arms tactics that could adapt to any terrain or enemy. Tang forces expanded Chinese territory to its greatest extent since the Han, defeating the eastern and western Turkic Khanates, extending influence into Central Asia along the Silk Road, and projecting power from Korea to the borders of Persia. Tang Chang'an, the capital, was the largest city in the world, with a population of around 1 million people. It was a cosmopolitan center that attracted merchants, artists, scholars, diplomats, and religious figures from across Eurasia. Islam, Nestorian Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and Buddhism all had communities in Chang'an simultaneously. The Tang Golden Age produced poetry that the Chinese still memorize today, art that set standards for centuries, and governance philosophy that shaped East Asia permanently. The dynasty also produced China's only female emperor. Wu Zetian, originally a concubine of Emperor Taizong, maneuvered her way to sole rule and governed China for 15 years with a combination of political ruthlessness and genuine administrative talent that historians still argue about. She rose from within the Liu clan's world and eventually ruled it. The Tang declined through the fractured century that followed its peak, with regional military governors accumulating power the central court could no longer control. By 907, the dynasty was over. But the Tang period defined what Chinese high civilization looked like at its best, and the Liu clan built every part of it. Number 2. The Liu Clan. Han Dynasty. Reigned 206 BC to 220 AD. The Han Dynasty gave the Chinese people their name. To this day, the dominant ethnic group in China calls itself the Han people. The Chinese writing system is called Han characters. The Chinese language is called Han language. That is the measure of what the Liu clan's dynasty meant to Chinese identity. Liu Bang, the founder, was a village official of no particular distinction who joined the rebellion against the Qin dynasty after its first emperor died and the empire began to collapse. He was not a great warrior, not a brilliant strategist, and not a man of impressive physical or intellectual gifts. What he had was an extraordinary ability to identify talent, listen to it, and use it. He surrounded himself with some of the finest military and administrative minds of his age and trusted them completely. He defeated his main rival, the far more talented and charismatic warlord Xiang Yu, through a combination of political patience and the strategic genius of his general Han Xin, one of the greatest military commanders in Chinese history. Liu Bang's own role in the battles was often to lose, survive, and come back. The Han military system transformed how China fought. Faced with the constant threat of the Qing nomads on the northern steppe, the Han invested massively in cavalry, breeding warhorses on an industrial scale and training armies to fight as mounted forces rather than infantry. Emperor Wu, the most militarily aggressive Han ruler, launched campaigns that pushed deep into Central Asia, sent Chinese armies further north and west than they had ever gone, and eventually broke the Qing Confederation's dominance over the steppe. The Silk Road opened and functioned as a trading network under Han protection. Paper was invented during the Han period. The civil service examination system that would define Chinese governance for 2,000 years was formalized under the Han. Confucianism became the official state philosophy. The borders of what the Chinese world meant were drawn during the Han Dynasty and have not fundamentally changed since. 400 years of continuous rule, interrupted only briefly by a single family that started with a village official who was simply better than everyone else at knowing who to trust. Number 1. The Ying Clan. Qin Dynasty. Reigned 221 to 206 BC. The Qin dynasty lasted only 15 years. It is still number 1 on this list. The Ying clan had ruled the Qin state in western China for centuries before their greatest member changed the world. Ying Zheng, who would take the title Qin Shi Huang, meaning first emperor of Qin, came to the throne of the Qin state at age 13 following the death of his father. By age 38, he had conquered every other Chinese state and unified the country for the first time in its history. The Qin military was the most disciplined and innovative fighting force in China at the time. The clan had spent generations on the western frontier fighting nomadic peoples, producing a warrior culture that valued results over ritual. Qin Shi Huang standardized the army's weapons, ensuring that parts were interchangeable across units, a logistical innovation that sounds simple and was genuinely revolutionary. He deployed crossbow formations with standardized bolts at ranges that devastated enemy infantry before close combat could begin. His armies moved faster, resupplied more efficiently, and replaced casualties more smoothly than anything his rivals could field. His administrative achievements matched the military ones and arguably exceeded them. He standardized writing across all of China, creating a single script where there had been dozens of regional variations. He standardized weights, measures, coinage, and even the axle width of carts so that roads could be used uniformly across the empire. He built a national road network. He connected existing defensive walls into what would become the foundation of the Great Wall. He was also one of history's most effective autocrats in the darkest sense. He burned books that he considered dangerous to his authority. He buried alive hundreds of scholars who criticized his rule. He became increasingly paranoid about death in his later years, sending expeditions to search for the secret of immortality and consuming mercury pills that he believed would extend his life, which almost certainly poisoned him instead. He died in 210 BC and was buried in a tomb complex that took 700,000 workers 38 years to build. Inside, 4,000 life-size terracotta soldiers, horses, and chariots were arranged to guard him in the afterlife. The terracotta army, discovered only in 1974, remains one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in human history. His dynasty collapsed within 4 years of his death, unable to survive without his force of personality holding it together. The Ying clan's rule of a unified China lasted barely 15 years. But in those 15 years, Ying Zheng created China. He took a collection of warring states with different languages, currencies, laws, and identities, and welded them into a single political and cultural entity. Every dynasty that came after him, the Han, the Tang, the Song, the Ming, the Qing, all of them built on the foundation that Qin Shi Huang laid. The country is still called China. That word derives from Qin. His name is in the name of the nation. 15 years, one family, one emperor, and China was born. 10 clans across 5,000 years of history. Some ruled for centuries. Some burned bright for a generation and were gone. But every one of them left something behind, in the soil of the country, in its language, its philosophy, its borders, and its memory, that has never entirely disappeared. China endures, and it endures in the shape these families gave it. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and leave a comment telling us which clan you think deserves to be number 1. Our next video travels to Japan to explore the most powerful organized groups in Japanese history, from samurai clans to ninja schools to warrior monks who once held an emperor hostage. We will see you there.